A federal judge is slamming the Trump administration, saying the government is completely responsible for reuniting the hundreds of migrant children still in federal facilities to reunite them with their parents here. So the remarks come as the government and immigration advocacy groups argue over who's responsible for tracking down their parents. Here's Diane Gallagher.
Families being separated.
The Trump administration telling the ACLU, essentially, we broke it, you fix it. In documents filed ahead of a hearing, the Justice Department argued the ACLU should use its, quote, considerable resources, its network of law firms, NGOs, volunteers, and others, to find parents who the government separated from their children and then deported without them, even suggesting that the ACLU be required to share weekly updates about their progress locating parents and whether those parents want to be reunited with their children. Making this even tougher, the government has resisted handing over entire case files for these parents, something the ACLU says would help expedite the search.
You know what's unfortunate? The government doesn't have a plan. The government's shifted the responsibility to us and NGOs to find these parents. We'll do it because the government's not. But what we need is information from the government. Any relative the government may know about, any last known address, something to help us. We're not going to give up.
It's not a small task. In a Senate hearing this week, Public Health Service Corps Commander Jonathan White said the parents of more than 500 kids still here may have been deported. Some of those children have been released to sponsors or relatives, but 410 of the separated children with parents no longer in the country remain in government custody. Meanwhile, each week seems to bring new allegations of abuse at shelters for migrant children. Court records first reported by ProPublica reveal that a former youth care worker for Southwest Kiev, Lebian Pacheco, is accused of molesting 8 boys, ages 15 to 17, who were staying at the Mesa, Arizona shelter where he worked between August 2016 and July of last year. Pacheco denies these allegations. Now, on Tuesday, another man, an employee at a Southwest Key children's shelter in Phoenix, was arrested on suspicion of molesting a 14-year-old migrant girl who was staying at the facility. A spokesman told CNN, quote, Southwest Key Programs does extensive work to prevent all forms of abuse. When these rare situations occur, all staff involved adhere to our strict protocols.
And our thanks to Diane Gallagher there.
All right, let's bring in now CNN political commentator Ben Ferguson and CNN commentator and Democratic strategist Maria Cardona. Morning to you both.
Good morning, Martin.
Ben, let me start with you. This suggestion, I guess it was in court documents, so it's stronger than that the ACLU take over trying to reunite these parents that were separated. Really? I mean, is that what it falls to? The government can't do it, so we give it to the ACLU?
Yeah, I don't think that's the job of the ACLU. I, however, do think that the suggestion that the government work together with the ACLU, which has a lot of information because they have been representing a lot of these kids and reunification, would be a smart idea. But to put
but wasn't the government
on
supposed to get that information when they separated the families? At that point of separation, don't you get names and all of that?
I agree, but you have the reality, as immigration attorneys have talked about, that sometimes you don't get good, accurate information. Sometimes you get misinformation. Sometimes the parents that are claiming to be the parents of the children are actually not their parents. Some of the parents do not want to be reunified and will waive reunification with their children. So we need to be clear. This is incredibly complex because you do have some parents and some people that were claiming to be parents out of the 500 kids that are still left who do not want to be reunited. That's the unfortunate part. So what I think is
how do you know that, Ben? I mean, where does that come from?
I've talked to immigration attorneys who have talked about this. You can look through government documents that happened even before we had this last separation policy with this administration. You have seen where there have been kids, unfortunately, that have been brought across the border illegally, sometimes with people claiming to be their parents who are not, and sometimes with parents, and when they leave or they're deported, unfortunately, they waive reunification. There are court documents showing
let me just stop you there so we can weigh in. It's a two-sided conversation. Maria,
sure.
Please, enter into this. The point that Ben's trying to make here is that in some cases, apparently the fact that reunification hasn't happened, there are justifiable reasons.
Let's be very clear. The instances that Ben is talking about, both when the parents are not the actual parents of these children or when the parents choose to be deported without their children, is minuscule. It is less than 1%. the majority of these parents, of course they want their children. Look, the fact of the matter is that this whole abomination and debacle has been an insidious mix of incompetence, immorality, carelessness, cluelessness, and callousness on behalf of this administration. This has been nothing less than government-sanctioned, Trump-approved child abduction that even the judge has said if the government does not get its act together, they will be responsible for more than 500 children being orphans in this country. This is not who we are as America. This is disgusting. It turns my stomach, and it is un-American. And the government had better get their act together to make sure that they fix what they broke instead of shunning it to other non-governmental organizations and nonprofit organizations who are doing what they can to help these children and to help these families, but it is not their responsibility, and they cannot do it alone.